Well, welcome back, everybody, and welcome to those of you who's joined us now. We'll go ahead and call the roll.
Agent,
Here.
Clegg,
Here.
Halliburton,
Here.
Sanchez,
Here.
Willits, Woodings.
Here.
5 present, 1 absent.
Excuse me, thank you. First up, we have a request for approval minutes from the work session and evening meeting of March 15th.
Madam Mayor, I
Yes.
was not here, so I need to abstain from this.
Madam Mayor,
Yes,
I move that we approve the meetings from the work session and meeting of March 15th.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. You call the roll? We do roll call for this one?
Sanchez,
Yes.
Woodings. Yes. Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Abstain.
Halliburton.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And next up, we've got the consent agenda. All items with an asterisk are considered to be routine by the council and will be enacted by one motion. There's no separate discussion on these items unless a council member or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the general order of business and considered in its normal sequence.
Madam Mayor, I move approval of the consent agenda, but I am recusing from number 10, RES 18922.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Sanchez,
Yes.
Woodings. Yes. Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And now we'll move into ordinances. Nothing's on first reading. We do have one on second or two on second reading.
Madam Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that all ordinances on the second reading calendar be read by number and title only and filed for the third reading calendar.
Without objection.
ORD 14-22, an ordinance CAR 21-00034 for property located at 6589, 6611, 6675, and 6775 West Victory Road, amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise City to change the classification of real property, particularly described in section 1 of this ordinance from R-1C Single Family Residential and A-1 Open Lands Park to M-1D Light Industrial with Design Review, setting forth a reasoned statement in support of such zone change and providing an effective date. Ord 15-22, an ordinance CAR 21-00027 for property located at 818 West Ann Morrison Park Drive, amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise City to change the classification of real property particularly described in section 1 of this ordinance and adjacent rights of way from C-2 DC General Commercial with Design Review and Capitol Boulevard Overlay to R-0 DDC DA Residential Office with Downtown Design Review and Capitol Boulevard Overlay and Developmental Agreement, setting forth a reasoned statement in support of such zone change and providing an effective date.
Thank you. And now we will move to third reading.
Madam Mayor, I move that further reading of ORD 9-12, 9-22, 10-22, 12-22, and 11-22 be dispensed with, and the record reflect that they have been read for the third time in full.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Sanchez,
Yes.
Woodings. Yes. Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries. ORD 9-22, an ordinance COA 21-00004, amending the development code regarding wireless communication facilities and associated definitions, section 11-06-04 period 1, and section 11-12-02.1, including changes to the review process and site development standards for attached and freestanding communication facilities. Ord 10-22, an ordinance amending Title 9, Chapter 2, Development Impact Fee, Section 12B, Boise City Code. This amendment updates the development impact fees per service unit and providing an effective date of May 6th, 2022. ORD-12-22, an ordinance amending Boise City Code Title III, Chapter 14, Stationless Shared Mobility Programs, and Boise City Code Title VI, Chapter 13, Bicycles, e-bikes, and e-scooters, approving a summary of the ordinance and providing an effective date. ORD-11-22, an ordinance repealing and replacing Boise City Code Title III, Chapter 4, entitled Sidewalk Cafes, setting forth the legal authority, purpose, and scope of the ordinance, establishing that general licensing provisions are applicable, providing definitions requiring a permit and establishing permits are non-transferable, setting forth application requirements, the ongoing duty to update an application and timing of applications, allowing for conditions to be placed on a permit, establishing that a permit does not grant any property interest, providing for application fees, setting insurance requirements, setting forth the application review process, establishing permit standards and requirements, providing the permit term and renewal details, providing for the denial, suspension, or revocation of permit and an appeal thereof, providing penalties for violations of the ordinance, approving a summary of the ordinance, and providing an effective date.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move that ORD 922, 1022, 1222, and 1122 be approved.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Sanchez,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
Bajent.
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
All right, thank you. And now we will move into special.
We have two on
Oh, I'm sorry.
extended reading.
Oh, first, second, and third reading. We've got two on first, second, and third reading. Excuse me.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that all rules of the council interfering with the immediate consideration of ORD 1622 and 1722 be dispensed with, be suspended, and that the portions of Idaho Code 50902 requiring an ordinance to be read on 3 different days, twice by title and once in full, be dispensed with, that the records show that they have been read for the 3rd time in full.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Sanchez,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
Bajent.
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries. ORD-16-22, an ordinance amending Boise City Code Title I, Chapter 16, Section 5, entitled Temporary Suspension and Amendment of Certain Sidewalk Cafe Rules to align with the newly adopted Sidewalk Cafe Codes. Boise City Code Title III, Chapter 4, providing a waiver of the reading rules, approving a summary of the ordinance, and providing an effective date. ORD-17-22, an ordinance CAR 21-00030 for property located at 1728 South Annette Street, amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise, city to change the classification of real property particularly described in Section 1 of this ordinance and adjacent rights of way from R-2 to R-3D, setting forth a reasoned statement in support of such zone change, providing for a waiver of the reading rules, and providing an effective date.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move that ORD 1622 and 1722 be approved.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Sanchez,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
Bajent.
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
All right, now we will move on to new business or special business, excuse me. First, we're going to hear from Maureen Brewer and Deanna Watson. Maureen from the city and Deanna from the Housing Authority on the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. Welcome.
There we go. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Maureen Brewer, Senior Manager of Housing and Community Development here at the city. Thanks for having us today to talk through the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. This program has been in effect for just over a year, began in February of 2021. So first, just a brief overview of what the Emergency Rental Assistance Program is, what it entails. To be eligible to receive funds from the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, households must not exceed 80% of the area median income. And there's a specific priority for households that are earning 50% of the area median income and below. And then of note also is that the total amount of assistance that a household may receive between the two buckets of funding, ERA 1 and ERA 2, must not exceed 18 total months. ERA 1 funds are available until September 30th of 2021, although we have requested an extension to December 31st of 2021. And then ERA 2 funds are available until September 30th of 2025. So we are prioritizing spending the ERA 1 funds first. As you all know, we have partnered with the Boise City Ada County Housing Authorities to administer the Emergency Rental Assistance Program for us. This is really one of their main lines of business in providing rental assistance throughout the county and has been for many years. So certainly leaned heavily on their expertise and experience, and is one of the reasons that the program has been so successful to date. The housing authorities are using a temp agency to provide the ongoing staffing and the extra capacity needed to manage the program. And they also launched, again, over a year ago now, but launched an online application and staffed call center to make sure that applications can move through the process efficiently as documentation is collected. And then one other thing I wanted to point out here was that there's been an extensive outreach effort that has been sort of multimodal, if you will, out to employment and labor agencies, our social service agencies and partners, school districts, daycare providers, et cetera, just to make sure to get the word out that this funding is available for those that are in need of rental assistance. And then again, really tried to do a broad brush in terms of how we're getting that word out through social media, again, using partner agencies and their staff, done some digital ads as well, and of course, presentations. Okay, I'm going to walk you through this slide just so you all understand how the money is moving and where the money is coming from. So in total, the city is set to receive $34.78 million in emergency rental assistance program funds. And then we're also leveraging county and state funds to be made available in the city as well. And we'll share more about how that's happening or has happened. So in addition to the initial allocation of ERA 1 for $11.5 million, that's that larger green bar that you see at the top. The city also received a first round reallocation of ERA 1 funds of $7.2 million. And then the Treasury has approved an additional $7.2 million. That's what you see in gray on that top bar in a second round of reallocation for ERA 1. We have the $7.2 million sort of tranche in orange that is within the city today and are spending that down. That first green bar, the $11.5 million, has already been spent, and then we're waiting to receive the $7.2 million in gray. So after the city expended its initial allocation of ERA 1, that actually happened in October. And as we awaited word from the Treasury for in regards to how much we would be approved in reallocated funds, the city collaborated with, of course, the Housing Authority and also the county to spend county ERA 1 funds within city limits in the months of November, December, and January. Then for the month of February, we had to tap into our ERA 2 funds while we were still awaiting reallocated funds. So we dipped into that ERA 2 bucket just for the month of February, received the initial reallocation of ERA 1, and are spending that now again in March. So the county funds then that we spent during November, December, and January helped about 600 or so Boise City households in addition to what our funds have done. And then the last point I want to make, if I can draw your attention to that ERA2 bar, is that 3.5 million in the green is what we have received so far. We're set to receive, we're approved for another 5.3. That 5.3 million is going to come to the city in 2 more tranches, and we can request the first tranche once we've expended or obligated 75% of our ERA2 funds. We're at 55% right now, so we'll be tracking that and then make sure to request as soon as we're eligible to do so. Oh, this need to remember to use the keyboard, I guess. Okay, and then lastly, at least for my part, before I invite Deanna up to run through the rest of the presentation, is the total assistance paid to date. This is a countywide program, so I wanted to give you the entire context. So between Boise City and Ada County, as of 6 days ago, we have expended 28.8 million in emergency rental assistance funds. 14.7 million of that has been expended within Boise City limits, and nearly 6,000 households have been served. Again, just within Boise City, it's well over 3,000 households, especially when you consider that some of those households that are currently categorized within Ada County served Boise City households during that 3-month timeframe that I mentioned earlier. Deanna, you're on.
Thank you. Okay. Well, first of all, I want to say a big thank you to our mayor and city council for your confidence in our ability to administer this program. As Maureen said, this mirrors a lot of what we do already as an entity, as a public housing authority, both for Boise and for Ada County. Normally, we spend about 12 to 13 million a year helping around 2,200 families in our housing choice voucher program. So this undertaking has more than doubled what we normally do in a year on top of what we do in a year. And we couldn't have done as well as we have without the partnerships we've had, especially here at the city. So I wanted to say thank you for that. Our belief was local administration is better than trying to fit within a bigger, like a statewide program, and we think that has proven to be the case. So just a couple of statistics, the funds, 85% of applications we've received have been paid. We have some in process, and we have about 8.5% who have been denied. And the denial reasons have to do often with either they're not in a rental, maybe they need home ownership assistance, they're over income, or they're out of our jurisdiction, or they don't complete all of the materials that we need in order to process. So 67% of our applications have originated from Boise, 20% from Meridian. The next highest percentage is Garden City. So really the areas that are right around the city of Boise. And over 50% been paid to 2 or 3 person households. The next highest percentage would be about 16%, and that would be 1 person households. And then the breakdown, as Maureen mentioned, we can go up to 80% of area median income. One thing that's been interesting to me to see from the beginning is the uptick has been in the 51 to 80% of area median income. So in the very beginning, we had, a lot of the folks that you would expect to really be struggling. I think as rent prices have continued to climb, they've started to reach the higher income families at a higher tick. And so they have turned to us for rental assistance as well. We are right now in a pause mode for 2 weeks as we are switching from the administration portal we had in place from the beginning, which was using our own web site as an application processing point. And that worked well in that we were able to design a program and get it launched within a couple of weeks, whereas you might have seen other jurisdictions around the country, once they received the funding, had to design systems, and that took some time. But as this has grown and extended out, our little website process is not, it's straining at the reporting side of things and recording. And so we're switching over to a product that's designed for ERAP. And we needed to pause to transfer data, some of it by hand, into the new system so we can pick up and begin the reporting process at a quarter break. So that's, we're in that mode right now. We open back up on April 4th. In the meantime, we're working internally to make sure we're learning the system, and we've got some soft launch within our own, we own and manage units as well. And so our own landlords are working with the process just to help us identify any glitches along the way. And then just recently, House Bill 742 was passed and signed by the governor. And that ties in with the voluntary reallocation process. So if you recall, back at the beginning when the ERAP funds were apportioned, 200 million came to the state of Idaho. Areas with population of over 200,000 could apply to receive their funding off of that 200 million. And that's what the city of Boise and Ada County did. And that's how we got the initial, a little over 24 million. The U.S. Treasury Department, that is where the funds come from, has a spend ratio requirement that they put in place, and you have to spend funds at a certain rate in order to avoid recapture. And Idaho Housing had 175 million to cover the balance of state, along with a couple of Native American tribes. They did not meet the spend ratio that was required, and so they've experienced one, they'll call it clawback of some of the funds that Idaho Housing received. Of those, 22 million went out of state, and about 11 million came back through that process that Maureen walked you through. What we wanted to have in place was a way for local decision-making about those funds so that they didn't cross state line, they stayed within Idaho. And so that's kind of the process that we've been working through now with Idaho Housing to try to ensure any funds that they would no longer be able to use, that hopefully we could put into place to serve residents of Boise and Ada County. Is that it?
So Mayor and Council, we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Madam Mayor.
Not really a question, but if I could just briefly say, I serve as ex officio on the Boise City Ada County Housing Authority Board, representing this council. And I've been incredibly impressed with how well the authority has used these funds, how quickly they responded, how willing they were to figure out all of the challenges and barriers that they had to overcome and do that. And just a hearty thank you to making sure that our residents in this time of great need had a resource that many other residents around the state, frankly, haven't had access to.
Madam Mayor, I want to also echo what the council president said. In my understanding, you all have knocked this out of the park. So that's great to see that none of our funds were clawed back because of lack of ability to deploy. I have a question around any data collection that's happening as part of this process. I understand that rents have been increasing throughout the valley, and wondering if folks are becoming, because we have such low unemployment, are folks just unable to pay rent because their rents are increasing? Is their income changing? Like, what are the reasons why folks are applying for rental assistance at this time?
Thank you. I would say that we've sort of been in a perfect storm between the pandemic, incredible rises in the rent levels, inflationary impacts, price increases for gas and groceries and all of that. So I think what we've seen is a perfect storm of conditions that have combined, especially in Boise, Idaho, with, you know, the spikes we're seeing, $300-400 rent increases with one notice. And so if families are barely making it on their own and they see a price increase like that, that can send them over. You add all the other factors. And I think this really has become a program of homeless prevention. And we can help for up to 3 months ahead. We can also go to address arrearages and back utility costs as well. We can go a total of 12 months, and then under ERAP 2, we can go up to 18 total. My concern is what will happen when we spend this funding and those other conditions haven't gotten better.
Yeah, I think that's a really great, that's a great point. And that's what I worry about too. It's like when this is over, then what are families going to be forced to do? And I think it underscores why we place so much emphasis right now at the city on housing and increasing inventory across income levels, because the demand is there. There are people who, don't have income, a lot of the income restrictions that the folks that you're serving are seeing, who just simply can't find a place. So I really worry about that perfect storm of this program ending, those inventory dynamics really coming into play, and what that means on inflation of rents in the Valley. So I think it's something that I know that our team is really keeping an eye on that. And I appreciate all of the work that you're doing. It's heartbreaking to see folks have to make really tough choices. And so I think that this alleviates that a little bit, at least temporarily. And I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was really impressed with was the amount of outreach you did to the community and different partners to make sure that everybody knew that this was available. And I know one of the strategies that you used was to reach out to a lot of the nonprofits that serve a lot of our more vulnerable communities. I think we handed out a couple hundred flyers over at the Bike Project. I'm curious if there's any data that tells us what was the most effective way, or what were really effective ways of making people aware that these services were available, or if that was able to be captured in any of that information.
Good question. I'm not sure I have the answer for you today, but I can look into that. I can tell you that one of the things that we did was move into kind of the digital arena with a marketing agency that has been able to drill down on where the requests for information about rental assistance are coming from. And then we can target those areas. Say if it's a multifamily complex of 300 units and we had a number of hits from that area, then we hit that area with more information, more targeted information. I don't know whether we have it on our application to say, how did you learn about us? But I'll find out and get that information.
Yeah, and Madam Mayor, just to follow up there, I know all of the different nonprofit directors that I've been in communication with really appreciated being able to be part of the solution and help push that information out there. I know some of them, were trying to help walk people through the application process. So I know that it did get used. And so I appreciate you reaching out to all these different groups who really know the folks really well who might need that help.
Madam Mayor.
Yes. Go
Thank you. Thank you, Deanna. Thank you, Maureen. And thank you for doing this very important, and I would argue life-saving work. So you said that you have some folks who don't qualify because they don't complete the application process. Do you reach out to those folks to find out what the holdup was or what the issue was?
Great question. Yes, we do. What we try to honor is the benchmarks that have been placed for us in the performance arena to ensure that we are moving applications along and aren't getting into a bottleneck situation. So what we will do is set those aside. And then we have internal staff who work to reach out to try to identify, is there a document that they needed they can't get? Can we help you with that? That kind of thing. So, but we set it aside so it doesn't continue running the clock, and then we pick it up again and try to get it through. So
great. Just a quick follow-up, Madam Mayor. I think it's wonderful that you've got somebody who's helping you find out what's the best way to connect with the community to make sure that they are aware of the resources that exist. Are you tracking Boise Renters United, the Facebook page? That's great. I noticed I have seen a huge range in the rental increase rates. Like you said, the 300 to 400, but I've also seen it as high as 700.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering if you're using that as a way to connect with folks.
Yeah, I think some people might say I'm stalking that page, but I do reach out to people who've indicated, hey, I'm in a crisis, I need help, to make sure that they know if they're out of Ada County, they go to IHFA. If they're within, they come to us.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, one more question. Sorry. So you said that primarily you're focused on keeping folks in that prevention phase where they're able to maintain their housing. Is some of this money also used to help people access new rentals? And if so, what does the rental application fee situation look like?
Another great question. Right now, the way the program works, we can only help people who are in a lease situation. So if somebody is in the search mode and they can get into housing and get a lease, then they can come to us. So we refer them to Jesse Tree, to the Catch program, our Path Home, to try to help them get into housing. And then we can help once they have a lease. So I don't have data really on what the impact of the application fees are for that program. I can say they continue to be and will again be a bigger problem for our regular voucher holders.
Okay, so this money is not used to pay for any application fees. They have to have secured the housing.
Right. They have to have a lease. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Deanna.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
First, thanks and congratulations on getting all the funding deployed and not clawed back. My question is, do we have any evidence or is there any indication or any way, frankly, to measure whether or to what extent this subsidy may have the unintended consequence of placing upward pressure on rental prices?
That's a great question. And I would say because this program pays 100% of the rent for the families, we have seen some landlords, maybe they were already planning on raising the rent, but they're raising the rent. We're trying to get people to stick with the rent levels at that entry point because we can help. What we have is a 3-month time period, so we can provide rental assistance for 3 months at a time, and then there's a reapplication process. We are seeing some landlords raise those rents or not use all of the funds that are just for rent. And then there's an arrearage that has accrued, even though we paid the full rent for 3 months because of the way they've chosen to apply the funding to their financial spreadsheet. So I think there could be some unintended consequence. I think there are consequences no matter what we do. And so what we're really encouraging the folks we're helping is to take the money that they would have been paying toward rent and save it, so that when this funding runs out or when their 12-month period runs out, they've got something to fall back on.
Yeah, thanks. It's tough. I appreciate that answer.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Bajan, I would just add to that one thing the Housing Authority has done throughout the time period that this program has been implemented is really worked hard to strengthen relationships with landlords. So of course, the ones that we already work in partnership with, but this has kind of opened the doors to a whole host of property owners, property managers, and landlords that wouldn't ordinarily be accessing a program like this necessarily. And so the Housing Authority has done a really nice job of outreaching to those landlords and relationship building with them so that they are sort of on our team, if you will, on the go forward. So a little bit of an antidote to perhaps some landlords that might be a little more, I don't want to say predatory, but are maybe taking advantage of the fact that there's federal funds that are being deployed in the city right now.
Madam Mayor, just one more question in line with that. So when we're talking about all of a sudden, it's not just the rental rate that you were aware of. Are these folks tacking on like other fees like administrative fees or cable fees? Can you give me an example of what you're seeing?
We are seeing across the spectrum, landlords, especially the larger multifamily complexes, identifying other ways to augment in addition to the rent that they collect. We have a list of what's considered within the rent and then what would be outside of the rent that we can't pay with these funds, and I can send that over as well. But yes, we are seeing creative ways to add income lines in some cases. We also are seeing a number of landlords who are reaching out to us on behalf of their tenants, who are concerned about their tenants, who don't want to lose their tenants, who want to help them in any way they can complete the application process. So our hearts are being warmed on that side of the ledger as well.
That's great. Thank you, Deanna. And I would love to know who those good landlords are. I'd love to personally thank them. And maybe that's what we need to be doing more of, is highlighting the folks who are living with a type of grace and not greed and not being predatory to our community members. So thank you so much. Appreciate that information.
And just as we close out, I too want to thank you both. This has been a very successful program and obviously a very much needed program in the city of Boise. And as you stressed and other council members did too, the money that we've received, we've gotten out as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And we'll do everything we can to continue to advocate that funds that the state opts not to use that could be spent in Boise are returned here. So we'll keep it that. Thank you all. And next up, we have Jesus with the Office of Police Accountability. Jesus Hara, are you presenting from back there? Are you coming up here? You're coming up here? Great. This is just as Jesus is coming up. This is a 6-month check-in. When we started the Office of Police Accountability, there were some delineated list of things that we hope to see change to improve accountability and transparency in this arena so that we can maintain public trust with policing. As you'll remember, Jesus came on and we said, okay, at 6 months, we'd like a check-in to see the progress that you've made on bat cases that needed to be investigated and closed out, any policy recommendations, et cetera, that you might have. This is not the annual report. So we'll see Jesus again in a year for the official annual report that will be it is expected to be a regular annual gathering. When we receive a report, we hear from the public from other parts around that. But for now, Jesus is joining us to provide an update, both on the office, the policies he's helped to develop, and then the caseload that he's been working through. Welcome.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, council members, good to see you guys. Yeah, as the mayor mentioned, I'm here for to present our first 6-month, our initial report of the Office of Police Accountability. I'd like to start. Sorry about that. There it is. By just putting the mission in front of you guys of our office. The Office of Police Accountability strives to be a leader in civilian police oversight by providing thorough and impartial review of the police conduct. The mission of the Office of Police Accountability is to advance fair and professional law enforcement that are responsive to community needs. So I'd just like to put that in front of you guys. We've been working off of this mission since last fall when I was appointed director. With that in front of you guys, I'd like to read you a message that I put together. I worked hard to build a team around me that has a passion for our mission and task. Civilian oversight aims to increase public trust and confidence in the police. I believe our independent reviews and audits of Boise police activity will translate to higher confidence in our police force. The city leadership and city council have provided our department with fantastic support and the necessary resources to get the work done. With this support, our team will move forward with ongoing analysis and review of police department policy, practice, and procedure. Today, the OPA team is represented by a diverse group with varying skill sets. The office consists of 1 full-time case administrator and 3 on-call investigators. The case administrator helps with data management, community outreach, citizen intake, and investigator technical support. Our 3 investigators combined bring over 70 years of law enforcement experience. We remain committed to providing increased transparency, unbiased oversight, and building vital relationships with our community partners. I thought I'd put together something like that just so that you guys know where we're coming from. As I mentioned, we have a very unique niche work, and not everyone can get exposed to this kind of work and move that product forward. And so, thank you again for the resources that we've seen come through the city. So I appreciate that. In front of you are the goals of the agency. We work closely with community engagement to get this out, to produce a communication for the public that helps outline what we're seeking to accomplish within our office. And so in front of you is our goals. Again, a big part of this is just to increase the trust and the confidence in the kind of work that our police have to do, and ultimately the kind of review that we have to do. And along the way, in the 6 months that we've been at it, there are times when we spend 45 minutes, with citizens when they have an opportunity to vent and just have an ear to share their experiences. And that's been very important. We're here to provide independent investigation of all critical incidents. Those are usually the officer-involved shootings that we've come to see here in the last year. We want to encourage greater community participation and oversight of law enforcement. A big part of that is community outreach, letting people know we're here and how to get a hold of us. We want to improve community relationships. We want to advance the public's understanding of law enforcement policy, procedures, and operations. We want to provide them a safe place for citizens to voice their concerns and commendations for Boise Police Department. And we also want to ensure that complaints are resolved in a way that maximizes public interest. So again, in front of you are the goals. We'll go ahead and move forward to some other information. Here's the organizational chart as it sits. We're a small team. Julianne Hagler is our case administrator. She comes from a background of nonprofit. She was a part of Big Brothers Big Sisters program before this. And then she also worked for the city in the Parks and Recs department as a program administrator. So again, very keen on taking care of our citizens and lending a good ear to their needs. And then in the bottom there, you'll see the names of our 3 investigators. Again, very, very proud of the group that we put together. All of them have an energy for this kind of a work. And all of them have, again, a very unique skill set. One of them comes from like Lexipool. They were actually training and policy regulation, was a deputy chief down in the South Atlanta area metro. John comes from the California area where he spent more than 30 years in law enforcement. So again, very excited about the credibility that they offer the work that we're trying to do. Here's a little bit about some of the work that we've put together since we came on board. We inherited, as Mayor mentioned earlier, we inherited a backlog of 9 critical incidents. These are officer-involved shootings that there was no public report completed by the office. So the top, you'll see 6 reports that we've published since December of 2021. 5 of those are from the backlog, and then 1 from 2021 was one officer-involved shooting that happened last June. And then on the bottom of this screen, you'll see 4 other shootings, officer-involved shootings that happened November 2016, January 17, March of 2017, and then October of 2020. These 4 are pretty much in the final stages of getting out to the public as a public report. And we're very close to just getting that in front of you guys as well. So we have 5 ongoing investigations. These are what we consider the critical incidents. As you guys know, that last year we had 5 officer-involved shootings in Boise. 4 of them remain ongoing in our office as a matter of review. And then the most recent one happened in February here in 2022. And so again, these 5 are still ongoing, and we're working through the different phases that these incidents go through. And once it gets to our lap, then we initiate our formal review of the matter. So with that said, we have reviewed quite a bit of casework, quite a bit of incidents, and we'll dive more into that. But we have two policy recommendations I'd like to chat with City Council about. One of them is officer body cam microphone. Our issue with this specific activity is that we've noticed some of the officers muting their microphones. And some communities have expressed concerns over this action. What we've noticed again, and when we're reviewing work, the officers are turning off their mics. We're not sure why they're doing it. They're inconsistent in that behavior. I know there are times when I would imagine there's protected pieces, HIPAA pieces that apply. But again, the policy is very vague on the BPD side. So we'd like to address that and ensure that the officers have a defined policy on when they should be muting their microphones. Other than that, we don't believe it should be happening. So very interested in getting that updated and making sure that you guys know what our thoughts are about officers muting their microphone. The second one has to do with vehicle dash cam equipment. When we're reviewing, again, BPD activity, we've noticed that none of the vehicles are set up with dash cams, which mean that the only video at time we have are the body worn cameras that are usually worn at chest level. And so there's no ability to see what's happening, what the officers are seeing, what they're encountering as they engage the community. And some of the critical incidents, if not all, there's a pursuit piece to it. Again, we can't see what's happening or what they're seeing. And so I think to be transparent and to fully offer, everyone the ability to see what's happening, it's vital to get this equipment. And so again, another recommendation that we've seen in the first 6 months of work. Here's a snapshot of some of the things that our office encounters. As you guys know, we have access to every police report that comes through the system. Last year in 2021, there were over 19,000 incidents that the police have reports on. And I gave you this snapshot because these are the ones that we spend quite a bit of time auditing, looking for consistencies again in police behavior or how they respond in certain cases, but also some of the inconsistencies again that we've noticed in some of the microphone usage and muting. But anyway, so just to summarize, there were 700 mental holds, 540 domestic violence type of calls, 950 driving under the influence calls, 840 controlled substance incidents, over 3,000 collision reports, and 3,400 burglary and theft calls, 700 rape, sexual assault, and abuse calls. And then there's also 420 OIA cases, Office of Internal Affairs cases. I bring this up because these are all the different types of things that we're watching video on, that we're auditing, that we're paying attention to. And again, as our investigators continue to be activated, they're also going to be helping with some of this auditing work and making sure that, for example, when they respond to a collision report, which is one of the number one reasons they go out, unfortunately, is, are they treating people with respect? How are they handling the parties? Same thing with, driving under the influence, right? How are they handling these kinds of things? The stop, is it legal? Those kinds of things. All these pieces are a part of the work that we're doing today. So just thought to give you a quick snapshot of the kinds of things that come through our office. As far as official caseload that's opened up within our office, in 2021, we had 57 documented contacts. These are a case that we put a number to, meaning they called about a concern about an officer, or they called about a concern about a law or how things played out, but it ultimately ended up in a case documented. In 2022, we're already at 26, so we're a fourth of the way there. And so we've been documenting, again, our contacts with the community since we started. Official audits, there in front of you, you'll see that we've completed 7 OIA cases audited. We're auditing all the community complaints that come through internal affairs directly. So they have another round of, the citizens have another platform where they can complain directly with OIA. And we are reviewing those cases as well. So, and then we have 19 other audits completed on random on-body video. So the beauty of technology, and as it evolves, we have access to now even live auditing. So we're actually monitoring the CAD system, if you will. This is where all the contacts that's happening through dispatch. We have a live screen where we can see what's happening in the city. And we're just constantly putting an eye on it just to see what the heartbeat is. And when we see something that's, requires a lot of activity or a lot of police presence, we want to look at that. So the next day we pull it up and see how that played out. And so again, it just creates another round of opportunity for us to see what's happening out in the streets.
Madam Mayor. Jesus, on that slide there's the 57 documented contacts in 2021. Do we know how many of those are those all fully resolved? Have we gotten to the point where we've answered that person's questions, taken the next steps as necessary?
Yeah.
Let them know that it wasn't maybe what they thought it was. Like, how are those resolved?
Yeah, those are all closed. So that was the big part of the work initially, is to make sure we got back to any of them that were on hold or were on queue or whatnot. But yeah, we've gotten back to all those people that had reached out to the office.
And Madam Mayor, just to ask that question again, 100% of the folks who've reached out in 2021, we've resolved their
Yes.
request.
Yes.
Great, thank
There's
you.
that I know of, there's no active lingering concerns out there. There's obviously people that weren't happy with some of the resolutions or whatnot. But no, yeah, we reached out to everyone that had reached out to us.
No, that's great news.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other?
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Just to follow up on that. Are you shooting for a particular timeline in terms of closing? Whether like Councilmember Halliburton brought up, if somebody reaching out to the office, and then whether that's clarifying something for them,
Yeah.
recognizing it's not what they thought it was,
Yeah.
or it is what they think it was.
Yeah.
Are we shooting for something so that we don't end up with multi-year
Right.
backlog?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that thought. I think it's too, just to be frank, I think it's too early to try to put timelines and parameters around what we're looking to do. We have an expectation.
Jesus,
Yeah.
just to clarify, but what I'm basically pointing to is we're not expecting to see years and years to go by.
I understand. No, we have a 30-day operating timeline right now. We expect to get things resolved within a 30-day period of learning of the issue. Each situation can vary significantly in that, but that is our goal, is when they reach out to get back and to finish that process within 30 days, depending on investigator access, data access, and also whether or not there's a court piece involved. But we have a 90-day window when someone can submit a claim on an incident. And so, again, the further they wait to get a hold of us, the longer the process takes to get it resolved, because you got to get officers back in play on something that happened 90 days ago, sometimes even more than that. But yeah, but to answer your question, 30 days is what we're shooting for. Yeah. A big part of the next phase of this work is community outreach. We want to get in front of the different organizations out there that represent our city. And again, just let the city know that we're here, how to get a hold of us, how to submit a claim, why you should submit a claim, those kinds of things. And so in front of you are the groups that we have met in person with. We've set up meetings, we've set up or participated in conferences in. But this is a group that was identified by also partnering with our internal folks. We have community experts in-house that have a foot in our nonprofit world, have a foot into different agencies that support our community. So this has been a big part. We have a list of maybe another 100 agencies out there. So we're consistently reaching out to get in front of them. So that's a big part of the work. we wanted to put something in front of you as it relates to the complaint process, something that's in my mind, easy on the eyes, but this is what it should look like. Complaint received, the OPA, we conduct a preliminary review, and if it meets certain standards, we get that in front of OIA. They conduct now the initial investigation. We monitor that. Upon receiving the findings from internal affairs, we get that information in front of the complainant. That's, again, A to Z, how it's happening, or how most of the cases should happen. Our ordinance allows for that flexibility. It calls for us to reach out to OIA, but we also have the flexibility to take on a case on our own independently from A to Z. And so obviously that wheel would look a little bit different if we keep it ourselves. And we've had moments of that, obviously, that happen.
Jesus, have you initiated that independent investigation to date?
Have we initiated any of them? Yes, we have.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure.
Yes, we have. Yeah, again, we try to be considerate of what we're hearing from our community. Many of them, obviously, if they're reaching out to us first or after BPD, there's a reason for it. And depending on what the ingredients are behind the concerns, we may take the case all the way. And we let IA know, hey, we got a case, this is what it's about, but we're gonna take it initially and we activate our investigators right away.
And if I could follow up, Madam
Yeah.
Mayor. So the ordinance as it's written, does that flexibility provide enough flexibility and enough direction to make that decision pretty easily?
We addressed the flexibility piece in our city regulation. The city regulation absolutely meets our needs.
Yeah.
The ordinance at times, especially with this piece, it's pretty clear that it wants cases to go through OIA first. And again, we've always understood the flexibility to be available, and it was addressed in the regulation. So I feel the ordinance is good, and then the regulation addresses any concerns.
Okay.
We've actually had attorneys fight some of these pieces, and then the regulation addresses their concerns. So I would say it does meet it.
Okay, great. I think this body would be interested in learning if you hit some barriers and you need some changes.
Yeah. No, I
Thanks.
appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. And then the kinds of things that we want to put in front of you in the future as it relates to reports. Again, we're focused on total context in our office about interactions with Boise police officers. Because we're the only agency in the state of its kind, we get calls from the entire state. I mean, last week we got 4 or 5 calls from north, from the west, from the east, you name it. And so we obviously, it's outside of our scope. We still try to help where we can. I've actually sent out emails to other law enforcement agencies with people's contacts and people's concerns just to move that forward a little bit. But again, there's such a trust factor when it comes to an internal audit or internal affairs piece that people don't want to mingle with that. They want to mingle with an independent body. And again, we are the only one in the state that does that. So big kudos to the leadership and the oversight to put that together. So in the future, again, we want to address or report on the total number of individual police officers that were disciplined. We want to get that out of the raw data and just start putting some trends to that. And then we also want to document how many total contacts that our Boise police officers are seeing with behavioral health. We've noticed that some of the officer-involved shootings have an ingredient of mental health and behavioral health concerns, and it's upsetting to see that that's a part of the world and part of the work that the officers are dealing with when it comes to officer-involved shootings. So again, we want to put more evaluation and more research into that kind of work before we come out with anything else on that work. So.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Jesus, are you tracking any racial, ethnic, any demographic information like that?
Yeah, that is a big part of what we want to do next. Again, when we talk about why people are being pulled over, or we're seeing traffic stops, because we get citizens complaining about stereotyping or profiling. We learned that Boise PD doesn't track it that way when it comes to race or even sex or even age or that kind of stuff. So we want to put together that work. And so, yes, the answer is that will be a part of our review. I just haven't put a timeline to when we can accomplish that, but we're definitely considering it.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Jesus, quick question on, I assume this will be in maybe your annual report, the total number of individual Boise Police Department officers that were disciplined.
Yeah.
But also, just in the same line, it'd be helpful to see the total number of disciplinary incidents. In other words, you can imagine, hey, we only had 2 officers disciplined this year, but there were 400 times discipline was administered. So I think we just like to see if we're having problem children situations in addition to a broad-based problem with a large number of officers being disciplined.
Yeah, again, I can appreciate that thought for sure. We've come to understand the general thought behind, again, internal affairs and the amount of discipline that's placed on officers, and the results, what the numbers show. And it's disproportionate. So definitely something that we want to look into.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
just to continue that line of thought, I thought that without getting too granular, it would be really good to know what the reasons for discipline were.
Okay.
Because I think that would be really insightful.
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, one more quick question. Were you just about to talk? I'm sorry.
I was about to say, well, looks like nothing more. Go ahead.
Jesus, right at the beginning, you'd said you had basically a 90-day limit. If a complaint is older than 90 days, you generally aren't going to take it up. Is that ironclad, or do you have some discretion? That I'm asking because what occurred to me is there may be some egregious case, truly egregious, absolutely warranting oversight that's 95 or 100 days old. Do you have a little bit of flexibility there?
Yeah, we do.
Great.
It's not ironclad. It's I don't know how else to say it, but it's usually heart-based. Like, is this, does my heart feel good letting this go without a review? And that's, for me, is a big part of the kind of work that we do and why citizens call. So yeah, absolutely. It's not ironclad. We work to meet and try to work under those guidelines, because I think ultimately to put an officer in a room to answer to something that happened a year ago, that's a tough predicament. It's not fair. With that said, if it's egregious, like you noted, if it's something that deserves our scrutiny, we're going to put it on. So yeah.
Well, Jesus, I think that might be it. I just want to thank you for all the catch-up work that you did and the information you shared, as well as some policy recommendations, because that's exactly what we were looking for. And the case that we made in determining that we ought to have an Office of Police Accountability. So really appreciate it. Look forward to further conversation on the policy changes, and then of course seeing the annual report in 6 months.
And I apologize. I know I speak fast, so if you need me to go over anything, or if there's any other questions, I can address them now.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, looks like you got another one.
Okay.
Quick question internally about how we'll pursue the policy changes. I know the office is going to work with the police department on identifying exactly how to do that. Will it then come to leadership and council? Looks like Courtney has an answer for us. Thanks.
Madam Mayor, Council President, I believe our process is to bring these recommendations to leadership and seek direction. For example, the dash cams have a significant budget impact. So I would seek your guidance as to when and if you want to proceed, which budget year, how that interacts with the current budget build for that department. But you will hear from me again on these topics.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I was thinking about the budget. If we're going to do the dash cams, we ought to address it before budget. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Really good to see you. Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you.
Oops, excuse me. Okay, and next up, we're going to go into the public hearing portion of our afternoon. And we've got one item, ordinance 1322. And then that will be followed by resolution 18322. This is the festival blocks ordinance. Jamie, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. Thank you for having me here again today to review the proposed festival block ordinance and to conduct the public hearing on the fees this afternoon. I'm not sure if we can get the presentation actually on the screen. Thank you. So with an overview of what I will go over today is a little bit about the history of how we got here and how we got the ordinance that's before us. I'll do a review of the ordinance itself at a very high level. We'll review the proposed fee and open for public hearing. A little bit about the history of how we got here. As each of you know, as we're a growing city, so are we with the growing number of events that we have within our city. And that really adds to the vibrancy that we have, particularly in our downtown area. And often we see that many of the locations, many blocks within the city are used again and again for these special events. Under current alcohol law, in those events, there is no open containers. And then we also have alcohol can be provided to these events, but only on a licensed premise, which can be obtained through a catering permit, which allows people to take alcohol off their actual licensed premise, but then acts as the licensed premise itself. So this was actually a stakeholder initiated ordinance. We were contacted by a local attorney as well as clients on the Basque Block or individual businesses on the Basque Block. And we really worked through how can they be more involved in special events? When is that appropriate? Because certainly they are impacted as businesses by the events that occur on those blocks. So we worked through a lot of details with them to come up with the ordinance that is before you today. And while we did hear from specific stakeholders to initiate this, we did develop this ordinance on a very broad perspective, looking at all of the city, not just one particular area or even just the downtown area. But when we look at what does it mean to have a festival block designation per this ordinance, we have the definition of a festival block, which is a public place designated for the temporary implementation of open container zones during a permitted special event. Taking that a step further, I think we need to define what is a permitted special event. And a permitted special event is when there is an attendance of over 1,000 people or a combination of alcohol sales or service, street closures, or extraordinary resources needed to make sure that we have a safe public event. So it's those two things in conjunction, making sure we have a festival block designation through this ordinance and then only enacting open container status through an actual permitted special event. The reason for this was because we really wanted to balance the public safety at these events. We wanted to help preserve the commercial viability in these areas for each one of those businesses. And we also wanted to maintain the integrity of the area. And what I mean by that is being a little bit creative in the toggle on, toggle off status. So we didn't just have open container zones 365 days a year throughout the city and have other unintended consequences. So again, maintaining the integrity of these particular areas. In doing this, we would have consideration and input from all businesses and all residents within a block area that may apply for this type of use. And the ordinance does have a reassessment process for a block because we realize that a block may change in the type of uses that are there. So we felt it important to be able to do that reassessment one time per year if needed. So when we look at the festival block and how they operate, there's a couple different ways that this can be initiated or not initiated. So if there is an event that might be happening on a block that is designated as a festival block, then they can determine not to opt in, or they may not be allowed to opt in because they didn't get a special event permit. So in those cases, open containers are not allowed and alcohol is not allowed to exit the businesses on the block. When we look at the open container and when that can be turned on and off within a festival block designation, those can only be turned on through a special event permittee and them wanting to opt in to that open container option. And that can be done through two configurations. So option one is a special event applicant doesn't seek a catering permit. They don't want to provide the alcohol or be responsible for that. Therefore, they would work with the businesses on the block to allow them to sell alcohol to flow out into the open container designated area on that block. Option two is a special event may seek a catering permit, one or more permits, depending on the type of event that they have, And they may also have the alcohol licensed businesses in that area also be able to serve out into that open container area that has been designated as such. And then the alcohol can only be consumed within the open container portion of the block. So it cannot exceed what those boundaries are as defined by that permit that is actually approved by the city. So when we look at the process, it's essentially like any other license application that we would have. There would be an application and there would be a fee. We're here today to take a look at that fee and have a public hearing on that fee, which is currently proposed at a $200 application fee. To apply, it needs to be an alcohol provider, so one business only that has an alcohol license on that particular block, and we would request a host of information from them, such as other businesses on the block, support letters for those businesses, understanding those other uses that are on the block. We would ask for contact information, a map, so on and so forth. An application to be considered will require 75% of the stakeholder businesses, uses, residents on that block to support in order for us to take that application forward further. So the city clerk's office will take that application and payment and review in coordination with BPD, Boise Fire, and take a look at all of these different types of things that might impact an event, that might impact the block as a whole. So looking at everything from,
We will,
you know, application review. Yeah. Maybe online.
My mic's not on, but somebody was talking and we could hear it through.
It was your voice, not coming from you.
Not coming from me? That's super weird. Ghost me. Hopefully it wasn't like in the upper whatever where like the dog's thoughts are just like come out of the, or whatever that space movie was with the dog talking. I think we can go ahead,
All
but
right.
if we hear it again, just stop and he's probably trying to fix it.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So in our application review, we'll review, you know, the geographic area, the nature of the other uses on the blocks, if there's alcohol with other businesses, any complaints that we might have received based on that block for various reasons, so on and so forth. And there's a whole list of items that we will consider that you can see on the screen. But with that, we also, if we move forward and we think it's appropriate to have a festival block after reviewing all of that information, we will reach out to a 300-foot radius of that block and in writing, reach out, let them know that we will be conducting a public hearing because we want to make sure we get all of that feedback from everybody that surrounds that block and would be impacted. Once we have that feedback, we will put a whole package together and come back to mayor and council with a recommendation as to how to move forward. And ultimately, the decision is up to mayor and council whether or not to approve that festival block designation. Requirements that come out of a festival block would be things like signage. So we make sure that the patrons are not put at risk if they open out, or go out of a business with alcohol when there's not an open container event, for example. Same thing with alcohol flow in, we'll have some signage requirements. We would also likely recommend that some of those businesses have additional staffing during certain events just to maintain, again, the safety of the patrons that might be exiting and to make sure they don't have other alcohol coming back on their premise that isn't theirs. Also, if the open container option is invoked by a special event, while there is likely more than 72 hours notice already being given because special events have to be approved further ahead than that, but at a minimum 72 hours prior to the event, the businesses would be notified of such an event. So the next steps that are before you are to conduct the public hearing this afternoon with regards to the $200 proposed fee for an application for the designation of a festival block. Then to take a look at the ordinance that is drafted and put before you and determine whether or not we need updates to that ordinance or whether you would like to approve or deny that ordinance upon the third reading today. From there, we will develop the application once we have an approved ordinance, do community education and outreach, and then we would like to have an annual review before mayor and council with the successes and challenges of the festival block designation. And with that, I will stand for any questions.
Thanks, Jamie. And I'll just point out on the annual review with a lot of our new ordinances, we'll do like a 6-month check-in. But this one, it seems to me, it makes sense that the first one, we not necessarily say 6 months from now, but we say end of festival season pretty much, so that then we can reevaluate and figure out what worked, what didn't, and what needs to be changed for moving ahead beyond that.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead. And then Holly.
So there's like some obvious places where a festival block, kind of makes sense, or in some ways almost already exists, the Bass Block, 8th Street and stuff like that. Can a festival block really go anywhere? Can it be on 10th Street between here and here if all the businesses apply for it and the street shut down? Like, how does that work for areas that aren't as obvious as our kind of typical blocks that are being used?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, any block could apply for this designation as long as they had an alcohol license on that block. They could apply, and it would be something that we would definitely consider. As you saw, there's quite a list of considerations, other businesses on the block. What would those impacts be? We would have to take a look at things like alleys, pedestrian flows, bike lanes, all of those kinds of things would be considerations. But yes, anybody could apply for that as long as they met those qualifications.
And Madam Mayor, the follow-up there. So a lot of that gets settled in the special events committee meeting, right? When you have to figure out all the different elements, street closures, traffic plans, all those different types of things that have to be in place. I'm curious, like, how it looks from like a physical standpoint. Is it that block is it, or do you have to have it fenced in? Like, is it just kind of like, that it exists because it's this block, or is it going to take extra like barriers, physical barriers within that area to contain it?
So Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, the designation of a block itself is one process. Then once we have special events that come in and want to toggle that on or off, then that's when the containment piece would happen, depending on the nature of the event. So some may have much more restrictive areas than others, just based on the type of event that it is, the past history of maybe that event, other things that go on the block. It really is a block by block and event by event consideration for us in which we would apply those conditions.
Madam Mayor. Thank you so much, Jamie. I know that this has been a very long time coming. I remember working on this when I came to council many years ago. So thanks for all your work. I have a couple of hypothetical scenarios that I would like to run through with you. So if 75% of the businesses on a block come to the city and say, we want to be a designated festival block. And that goes through. So they're now a designated festival block. And then a business on that block wants to hold a special event on the block, but not have the other businesses able to provide alcohol to that event. Is that still possible under this ordinance?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Woodings, yes, it is. Because again, each individual special event would toggle on or off that open container option. So it is up to the event as to whether or not that is on or off for their specific event. So if somebody on a particular block wanted to have an event, maybe it's a fundraiser for them and alcohol is the primary way that they make their fundraising dollars, then they would not have to open up the open container option. They could be the sole provider of alcohol in that location.
Great. And then scenario number two, say there's an event on a festival block and I have this really great little backpack wine cooler. And so I pack it full of bottles of rosé and I go to the festival and I'm like, I'm just going to bring my own rosé. I'm all set here. It's my favorite kind. What happens then?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Woodings. So typically the conditions on those individual events does not allow outside alcohol from a personal standpoint. It has to be provided from an actual licensed alcohol provider.
Excellent.
And that is the recommendation that we make. We do have events that request the option to bring their own alcohol, so on and so forth. But because of the liability reasons, we recommend that it is a actual licensed alcohol provider.
Excellent. I'm in no way condoning that people bring their own booze to events. I was just we heard a few pieces of feedback from some stakeholders, and I just wanted to super clarify what will and will not be allowed, what the potential scenarios are. So thank you for entertaining my ridiculous line of questioning.
And Madam Mayor, Councilmember Woodings, again, those things are controlled through the conditions that are put on special events. Things like, hey, there's a checkpoint that you have to check in and you may have to have tickets. You have to be wristbanded, especially if it's an over underage event, those types of things. So it's really on the individual special event in which those conditions are placed versus on the designation of the festival block.
So just to follow up on that, to really be clear that this is already a requirement. If there's an event tomorrow on a block where the streets shut down and one organization, one business on the block is having an event where they're selling alcohol, and so you can be out on the street, you already can't bring your backpack of rosé, right? Like, because there's already, through the special event process, it is not allowed to bring your own alcohol.
Currently, we don't have open container. That's what gets toggled on and off through a special event through the festival block designation. So currently you could not do that because we don't have an open container area within the city.
No, but you can have a drink on a block, but right now you can't walk into one business, bring a drink from them out to the party on the street, but you can be at a party on a street if they have a special events permit and drink on the street if they're selling alcohol, correct?
Madam Mayor, that is correct.
And the special events permit today delineates that if I'm going to go to that party on the street, I can't bring my own drinks. I have to be in a controlled area and purchase through them through their license.
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So you made the point I was going to, which is that I've heard some fear myself, but it, at least from my perspective, it's already controlled in various ways, and it actually provides greater control under this ordinance than we have today. My question is this: we have a couple of locations in the city where it's possible, maybe even likely, that there might be an event or two, especially say on a New Year's Eve or something, that would move across blocks. So it would be a 2-block event. Does the ordinance allow that? And in that case, then you also have to close the street and, the intervening street and some other things. And how will we license and accommodate an extension like that?
So, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, I think there's different ways that we could do that based on the individual event. So typically, if it's an event that crosses over, you may require street closures and you may require containment in different ways, whether it's bicycle fencing, cyclone fencing, so on and so forth. But again, that would be managed the special event process. We still have to follow, even though there are the open container toggle on, toggle off, there are still alcohol requirements from the state and city level that we have to follow. So a million scenarios when you ask that question ran through my head, and it's hard because there's so many variations of that. But I really do think that per the special event process, knowing that police is involved in that, knowing that the city clerk's office from a permitting perspective is involved in that we would have that containment in accordance with those existing codes and regulations. I think if we wanted to toggle on open container, that would have to be within a designated festival block. You might be able to have another catering permit on the next block over, but you would have to have that contained within those individual blocks, or you would have to have a larger area that is contained across those blocks, which, as you explained, would probably have street closures. So again, I really rely back on that. It's really event by event, and the special event team would look at all of those variations to make sure that we have a safe event that is in accordance with all the alcohol laws of the city and the state.
One follow-up, if I might. So the other question I have is, who's going to be responsible for cleanup of glasses, bottles, whatever that ends up in the open alcohol area? If I can carry a glass or a bottle out from a particular vendor, will that vendor then go collect all their glasses? Have we thought that part through?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, the special event organizer that would toggle that on would be responsible for that cleanup. And as we work with businesses and designating those areas, likely we would not be allowing just necessarily glasses out, but
Right.
I think it's the opaque containers that we would fall back on that they have to have provided. And then that way you would kind of have some delineation. But at the end of the day, it really is the special event organizer that toggled that on that's responsible for their special event space to be cleaned up after that event.
Thank you.
All right. Well, now with no further questions for Jamie, we enter into the public hearing portion of this on the fee. There's nobody in the room. Anybody online?
Madam Mayor, there's no one online.
There's nobody online and nobody in advance said they had an interest in testifying. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I certainly got all of my questions answered. I believe the appropriate process at this point is to ask for a third reading of the ordinance. Is that correct? Okay. I move then that further reading of ordinance, excuse me, I've got to get the ordinance number.
I guess so.
Of ordinance 1322 be dispensed with, and the record reflect that it has been read for the third time in full.
Madam Mayor, point of order. Did this ordinance already have a first and second reading? Oh, it did? How did I miss that? Okay.
Okay. We have a motion, a second on the table. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Sanchez,
Did we actually get a second?
I second.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes,
Halliburton.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Madam Mayor, I move that OR 1322 be approved.
Second.
Madam Mayor, just quick point of order. We actually have to have the clerk read the ordinance for the third time before approving the
Oh, we
ordinance.
have to read it. Sorry.
ORD 13-22, an ordinance adopting a new chapter 19 to Boise City Code Title III entitled Festival Blocks, setting forth the legal authority, purpose, and scope of the ordinance, establishing that general licensing provisions are applicable, providing definitions, providing for the designation of festival blocks, providing an application for festival block designations, setting forth the factors and standards for festival block designations, providing the authority for designations and that no property right is granted, requiring designation to operate as a festival block, establishing designations are non-transferable, providing the term of designation and compliances with all laws required, setting forth signage requirements, providing the uses allowed under festival block designation, establishing process for designation reassessment, providing for all the denial, suspension, or revocation of a festival block designation and an appeal thereof, setting forth penalties for violations of the ordinance, approving a summary of the ordinance, and providing an effective date.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Now I move that ORD 1322 be approved.
Second.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I appreciate that we had a public hearing on this. It's also notable that no one showed up to testify, which tells me that the clerk's office did a good job in their outreach. I know that this is a new process. Change is always a little bit feared by someone somewhere, and I know that that's happened in this case. I look forward to the 6-month review. I think this gives us a tool that allows special events to go forward in a way that is actually more controlled than what we have today and allows more of the businesses in the area of a special event to participate rather than being excluded from it. So I look forward to this.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
I echo that this is something we've been hearing from several blocks in the city for a while now. And I think it's going to really allow some of our more vibrant blocks that are full of restaurants to collaborate on events in a different and very cool way. I'm excited to see if anyone takes advantage of it. And if they don't, we'll have to figure out what kind of changes what we need to make so that folks will take advantage. I think it's going to be a really great asset to our city.
All right, with that, we'll go ahead and take a vote.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes,
Halliburton,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move that resolution 183-22 be approved.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Sanchez,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes,
Halliburton,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And with that, we do not have an executive session. Nope. All right.
Madam Mayor, I move we adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.